Well, Scott, thanks
David?
for sitting down with me. And I was in the DC area and wanted to come. I heard that you are no longer with CISA,
Mm-hmm.
have moved into, you were just telling me a little bit, which I'd love to hear more, doing some traveling, being with family.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to reconnect with you, hear about what's going on, let some folks out there hear about some of your history, what
Mm-hmm.
led you up to being part of CISA, and then this report that came out recently that I've been seeing floating around LinkedIn, and a lot of people are commenting on it. That was back, I think, part of your work with CISA
Mm-hmm.
around UAS drones, what you can do to detect and track as a more of like a commercial or critical infrastructure end user, right? What are you allowed to do? How do you get started even tackling this potential threat, right? So wanted to at some point, get into that report and, anything you'd want to kind of advise people on, or
Yeah.
just comments that you'd like to make on that. But I guess with that, well, you said something about travel. I guess since
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of taken a little hiatus here, tell me about that. I just wanted to hear, like, where have you been? What have you been up to?
Right. I think our last place that we just got back from was Copenhagen.
Okay,
And so it's one of those places I've always wanted to go to. And, I've never had the time to schedule and plan. So my wife and son, we all went there and visited family. We have family there in Copenhagen.
nice,
And it was just an amazing place. The culture, the pace in which they operate, everyone has a focus, clean, really, really a beautiful country.
wow,
And so took advantage of that, and we did a lot of traveling up the eastern seaboard at some beaches
nice.
um, during the summer when I was off, and and kind of across Virginia and Jamaica. Went
Okay,
down there for a while too.
nice.
So it's just been a real refreshing time. Since May is when I left DHS and CISA, and really left just to take a break, just to unplug for a minute, get back to some family, the slower pace of life for a second. I spent nearly 30 years in the Army and then jumped right into CISA and nearly a decade with CISA. And I was like, I just need to take a sabbatical. And that's what this last few months have been since
Nice.
May, is just a break to just unwind. Um, in addition to traveling, though, what I've done is I started flying as a hobbyist. Bought a drone. I've worked with drones a lot, but never my own.
Yeah.
So I bought my own drone and started flying it as a hobbyist. And then I took my Part 107. And the Part 107 license was really to get more reintegrated back in the technology, learn about it. But it had some surprises for me. It really offered like an eye-opening opportunity to say, look at it through the lens of an operator. Because I've always been the security practitioner on the other
Right.
side of that, the risk management person. And I had yet to take a really in-depth look at what it means to fly a drone.
That's
And
cool.
both as a hobbyist and both as a Part 107 pilot.
Nice.
And that has kind of really grounded me and reflected on the policies and the guidance that I've been releasing over the last several years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how. I'm thinking of like Part 108,
Uh,
and sort of your perspective on that as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I'm thinking about that too.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Well, I think about my son, my 5-year-old son, is getting more and more into drones, and
Mm-hmm.
like I'll have my laptop up working on radar,
Yeah.
information, and showing things on the screen, tracks, and then camera slews over and shows a drone. So my kids are constantly seeing, if they walk by or come in and say hi to me, then they're seeing drones
Yeah.
on the screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they've gained an interest in that. So then when I go to conferences, I'll like win a drone, a little toy drone, and
Mm-hmm.
bring it back to him, and he'll fly it around until it
Yeah.
breaks, and
Yeah.
I'll upgrade it just like a little bit at a time. But he's pumped about it. He even calls one of them his radar drone because they've
Perfect.
just mixed the two together. He's like, hey,
You
when
know,
we go fly my radar drone, can you help me with this? I'm like,
that's
I'll just
perfect.
leave it what it is for now.
Yeah.
But it is such a cool world. Like I do envision my kids between drones, AI, all this crazy technology. I'd love for them to be obviously exposed young, and then on the positive side,
Mm-hmm.
like what you're learning now with the hobby side, with the Part 107 side of drones, to do it well, to do it right, and use them for search and rescue, use them for
Mm-hmm.
delivery, all this cool stuff. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
a brave new world, I think, that we're entering right now.
It is. I
Right?
also have a
Yeah.
5-year-old.
Oh, do you?
And,
Okay,
and
yeah.
doing the same thing. I'd go and fly drones. I'd take him with me, and he's the assistant, or he jumps on the controls, and I was really surprised. He's fine. He knows almost intuitively
Wow.
how to fly a drone, and so it's going to be part of his future. And
For
so,
sure.
no, why not start getting them integrated early on and do it the right way, like you just talked
Exactly.
about.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive more into technology. I was just going to go back to a comment that we made earlier before we started recording, which was around, technology, how immersed we are becoming as a society in
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And your sabbatical, I think, is really interesting. I'd just like to hear maybe one more comment on that for people out there. We're all technologists, driving for like really cool innovation, selling these products, going hard at it. But what are some of your takeaways out of this 6 month or so
Yeah.
sabbatical of being around humans and all
Right.
that, right?
Um, that's a really good question. I think what I really recognize the most is how fast-paced everything is. On the security side, trying to keep up with technology is a never-ending effort, and you are always behind, and that creates a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, because
Mhm.
you're always worrying about the next iteration of technology, and you're still behind the last iteration that you're still focused on, and that has a level of stress to it. And sorry, and so I noticed that when I pulled away, and I kind of intentionally pulled away, um, the stress of that kind of went down, and I was able to see things a lot more clearly,
Nice.
and appreciate drones not as a threat, not as a risk in in wholesale, but more of a technology, more of something that's going to be of use, something that's going to be amplifying the way we live in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think stepping away allowed me to do that a little bit more deliberately.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
That's cool.
it's been eye-opening. Same thing with artificial intelligence and how drones can use a lot of these platforms now, and the data you collect. It's going to be really interesting to see where it goes.
Okay. Well, and hopefully it carves out more time that we can spend with our families as AI and technologies.
Exactly.
We're leveraging it to do things more efficiently, right? That
Yeah.
would be the hope.
The hope.
But well, with that, okay. Well, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Getting your Part 107 license,
Mhm.
getting hands on that ground truth of what it's like to be a pilot,
Yeah.
and then this report that maybe share a little bit about what your role was
Mhm.
in helping with this and just some of your lessons learned overall. And we could dive into maybe some of the sections. I think it'd be interesting
Yeah.
for folks out there. But yeah, just I guess take us in that direction.
I will. Really, like on my role at CISA, I think it's a good start and lead into this type of report that we did. Um, I've been there for almost a decade, and had a really the best opportunity that I could have had following the military. I spent the first portion focused on soft target security efforts, right? Active shooters, vehicle ramming, and then quickly kind of moved into, because I was very interested in it, emerging technologies, as we called it, those threats that we are seeing from convergence to drones. And when we started, there was not a lot of organizations that had drone security program.
Oh, I mean,
You know,
still
CIS,
there still aren't.
there still
I
are,
mean,
right? And even CISA. So we were able to build the CISA small UAS security office like from the ground up.
Wow.
And it was just me and a few really dedicated, intelligent hard chargers that just wanted to know all things about drones. And slowly went from a few to many, and it really, what we started to notice about it is we engaging with our partners. It wasn't about helping them understand what to do whenever a drone is flying overhead, and that wasn't the end goal. It was really trying to get them to understand that they needed like an enterprise-wide risk management process that included drones, like many other threats.
Because you're almost like, well, where does this fit into your plan? And they're like, what plan?
Yes.
And then you're
Yeah.
and that kind of cracked the door open.
It did, and
Oh,
then
wow.
the what plan was, hey, you have an enterprise plan already, right? Don't forget that you already deal with risk on a day-to-day basis. Don't treat this as such an anomaly,
Interesting.
and
Okay.
say you are doing things now that can supplement the problem set that we're facing with drones.
Interesting.
And so that's what we started to look at. We not only did we look at the physical threats, but the cyber threats. We were in CISA,
All right.
so everything is cyber and physical.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
so-
Tell me about that just briefly. The
Yeah.
name, even because it starts with cybersecurity, right?
It does.
But then also the rest of it, right? Cybersecurity and infrastructure
Security Agency.
security. So is it the and infrastructure that includes everything else, or was it
Mhm.
originally primarily cybersecurity? I mean, I was curious how the drone piece emerged from within that.
No, so we have, since I've been before we transitioned away from the Department of Homeland Security as a directorate and became our own independent agency, we'd always kind of separated between cybersecurity, emergency communications, and infrastructure security. Those 16 critical infrastructure sectors was our focus. We just pulled it all together because it was a little bit separated and it shouldn't be in a converged world, right?
Totally.
So bringing them together really brought to light a lot of the problems that we had. So
yeah.
for me, it was a real opportunity with something like drones. So as I got into the conversation with drones, I quickly realized this is not a physical threat. This is a cyber and physical threat.
You're right. And it's a ground and air threat. That's another convergence that's happening within our
absolutely
security world, right?
Yes. So it was like this really fun, new threat that I had never imagined would be as complex as it was.
Okay. Can you give us a timeline? Because I'm curious, what year did you launch this part of the program to look at drones as a threat?
Yeah. So 2018.
Okay.
So we started leaning in it in 2018.
It's like 7 or 8 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like almost 8 years
I joined in
ago.
17. I spent the first part doing like active shooter and things like that. Then right away we started seeing that drones was an emerging problem.
But think about it's been 8 years, but there's still a pretty big gap, right?
Gap.
I mean, if you think about, let's say, an airport
Mm-hmm.
today, no more geofencing from DJI. Therefore, 80% of the drones out there, plus 100% of them, really at this point, could just take off.
Yeah.
In front of a commercial airliner, unfortunately, and there's nothing inherently that's going to jam it up or stop it.
Yeah.
So it puts airports at more risk today than there was when you guys started.
Yeah.
However, that's interesting. That was a foresight, I think of DHS or CISA to actually call drones a potential threat. I was like way ahead of the curve because we're still like barely waking up to it, and more so now than ever after the New Jersey frenzy with FIFA World Cup coming up in summer 2026 with the Olympics 2020. Everyone's starting to shift gears and really think about it, but you guys were very much ahead of your time, I feel like.
Yes, and we definitely were not alone. There were our FBI partners were starting to lean in. DHS, other agencies within DHS were leaning in on it. We just took the opportunity to say we need to lean in, gain what knowledge we're getting from Department of Defense and others, and start feeding that to the critical infrastructure community. That's something that's unique about CISA that I really, really appreciated probably the most is our customer was the private sector.
That's cool.
Owners and operators of critical infrastructure that we rely on every day. And that brought me face to face with those owners and operators and understanding what risks they are dealing with. And so everything I did was really to help them understand the threat and then help them manage their risk from the cyber and physical threats.
Wow.
So it's an interesting twist, and from an agency perspective, like that's my customer, and that's where I put my time and energy.
Well, and partly it's because in the U.S., a lot of our critical infrastructure is privately owned and managed, right? Yeah. So that's a very nuanced, but it's like, okay, but then there's 16 sectors that are defined as critical infrastructure to the U.S. existing and our way of life. Yet most of those privately owned, right? Or much of it.
Vast majority of it.
Wild. So then, okay, cyber is a big threat, or drones now is a big threat to electric utilities, but those are private companies that own those utilities, that manage them, the security for them. So then there's a lot that goes into that.
It is.
So they really do need, it is, wow, it's interesting. But some countries probably just have that all owned by the federal government, whereas for us, you were that bridge between those two, right?
Yeah, CISA is served that bridge, and it relies on the public-private partnership. One of the things that I was able to do is establish a working group that had, it was under something called CPAC, the Critical Infrastructure Partnership Advisory Committee. And it is a really unique committee that you can bring together of federal, state, local, private sector entities across those 16 sectors, academia. You bring them all together into a room in CISA, and I would host these meetings and say, what are we focused on, and what are we going to work on to try to help educate the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands of infrastructure owners across the country. Things like this is fruit of that labor. Bringing those people in there and saying, hey, what are we looking at, and what are you concerned about?
What are you talking, like, what are the types of end users that would be there? Are you talking on water treatment? Are you talking stadiums?
Chemical, stadiums, water treatment, all the major sports, they were represented nuclear, dams, transportation, airports, They're all the big companies that, or represent the bulk of that infrastructure would have their chief security or someone that they delegated to come to those working groups and participate in those conversations.
Wow.
And not only participate, but actually add value into them in a way that you could see them in the words of the guidance that we were developing.
Wow.
And that's something unique we had with CISA.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, we've got a copy here. I have a black and white printer at home, so for our homeschool,
Yeah.
But so it's the Unmanned Aircraft Systems Detection Technology Guidance for Critical Infrastructure, right? And November 2025. So this was very recent.
Yep.
Thus, I saw it recently come across my LinkedIn feed and people commenting, and what sparked this, conversation. So, so this is something you had been working on while you were with CISA for quite a while.
Yes.
I mean, can you tell us a little bit about this? And I'd love for folks listening to this to go check it out. We'll put a link in the description and, to go read through this. Is this the full document? You have some resource links, but is this the complete?
It's the complete document.
Okay, cool.
And there are some extra resources links at the end
Okay.
that I would encourage people to go to. But yeah, this is one of the documents that we worked on while I was there.
Right on.
It's great to see it come out. I was really
Okay.
happy to see it
Big
finally
time.
published.
Well, so, I mean, for me, I work obviously a lot with radars, right? Detecting, tracking, identifying, classifying drones. That's one of the elements that you mentioned here, amongst other sensors, acoustic, cameras, RF, remote ID. I'm sure remote ID was probably fairly new when you were starting to work on this report, right?
Yeah.
And so, for one of my questions is, did you guys, what did the process look like for vetting or testing those? It seems pretty interesting what you were able to determine, as I read through pros, cons, different, environmental challenges, walk us through how you did that or what that looked like.
So I think something important about this guide, and it was very deliberate on our part in the way we approached the guide, is first of what it's not. It is not a technology manual or some type of, real in-depth evaluation of the different types of technologies and sensors out there. It's really a roadmap for decision makers. Because the way we look at it is, again, taking that risk management approach to it, is we didn't want our partners to be reaching out to vendors without understanding what their capability requirements were in the first place.
Okay.
So, are you even worried about drones? Right? Is it a problem that you have? So there's guidance that lets you understand, I need to look around, ask my partners, what are your vulnerabilities? You need to know what areas of your facility are actually vulnerable to aerial threats.
Yeah.
You may not have any, you may have many, but you need to be able to list those and prioritize those.
In fact, I don't know if this is something you can speak to or not, but we were driving down the street on the way here, and the Lyft driver pointed out the FBI headquarters, and I noticed on the top floor, there's obviously some windows up there, but there was some sort of a covering, like a brownish, kind of like netting almost, that circled the entire top floor of that building. That was unique. I wondered if that was maybe for the threat of drones. I was curious, because what else could get that high? Maybe probably just for snooping or, videoing what's on their whiteboard, or who knows, maybe crash avoidance. Obviously it's FBI. We can't, speak to the specifics, but I just observed it was just there while I was driving by, and I thought perhaps that could have been a mitigation for that. Maybe they did an assessment like you're saying and determined that perhaps.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
It might
that's
just be the
something-
sun. It could just be like a block.
it could be that pigeons, right? But who knows?
Yeah.
They should, but yeah, that's exactly right though. A lot of our partners in my early conversations I'm hearing drones are bad. I'm seeing the drones overseas, and I want to protect against them. And the first response is hey, the vast majority of the drones are not malicious. They're part of our society. You have to kind of get used to them flying around your facility.
Look at New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Where that
Most of these are
situation.
compliant.
That was interesting.
Yep.
But
They're following
people-
the rules.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's an education piece on our partners. And so we wrote this in a way to try to say you need to become very familiar with the drone technology, the capabilities, and the capabilities go one or two ways. They are capabilities for good or capabilities for bad.
Yeah.
You just need to be aware of what those are so you can apply those against your facilities, your crown jewels. What are you most concerned about? Is it surveillance? Is it kinetic? Is it sabotage? What is it is it harassment? Because it doesn't make much sense for you to approach a vendor if you don't know your environment, if you don't know what threats you're concerned about, if you don't know what you're trying to protect. So this is that first step when you look at the guide is all about knowing what you need first.
Okay.
And then the next step is like you really need to understand the basics for detection technology. We try in the very beginning to separate detection from mitigation, because most people use counter UAS as this all-inclusive
Yeah.
bucket, right? And I think a lot lean in the mitigation piece when they say counter.
Yeah. That's always a struggle for marketing too when you're involved in that world. Like,
I would imagine.
Because like people are Googling CUAS, counter UAS, to find something that's passive.
Yep.
But like, so then you have to use that language sometimes in your material to point those people towards your stuff.
Because that's what we've been told, right?
You know,
Conditioned to know.
But you're right. But it's really truly just like detection, drone detection or drone, mitigating. Yeah, those are quite separate.
They are. And there's a whole family of opportunity before detection that we could talk about. But that second part of this like 3-part series is knowing the types of sensors that are out there. And there are 4 primary, you mentioned them. All the sensors have their strengths and their limitations. What we try to do is give general strengths and limitations.
More guidance, perhaps, right? Sort of like guiding big picture.
Big picture.
Yeah,
like acoustics. Hey, acoustics may not be as effective in a loud noise area. So
like
they may
everybody screaming and shouting.
Or next to a large freeway,
okay.
There's ambient noise that's going to cause them to have more difficulty. That's not saying that there's an acoustic company out there that hasn't figured the problem out, but in general, acoustic listens.
Or ask. You're calling that vendor. Hey, have you mitigated for this? In your maybe mitigation. Maybe I should leave that word out. But I've heard this is a potential sort of weakness of this technology. Is that true for you? Have you solved for that? Maybe they have a good answer. Perhaps
And that's exactly right. And that's why when you look at step 1 and step 2 of the guide, step 1 is understanding what your requirements are.
Yeah.
Right. And that includes the type of environment you live in, operate in.
Yeah.
Step 2 is the type of sensors and those limitations. So when you do reach out to vendors or they reach out to you, you have a starting point. And again, it's basic. Right? It doesn't go into great detail.
Yeah.
But then step 3, and I think is oftentimes the things we don't talk about the most, is the integration. Right? So just because you get detection technology, you haven't solved the problem. Right? By far you haven't solved it. Right?
Totally.
You have to be able to integrate that into your current security system, and you have to integrate it into both your physical and your cybersecurity existing systems. So the detection is simply something that can cue a response from a cybersecurity professional who's watching the network, and from a physical security person who's watching the perimeter. And so detection technology on its own, I don't know that it would be as useful if you don't take a very proactive approach to plugging it into your already existing ecosystem of security.
Yeah.
So that's what we talk about a lot, doing that, working with your neighbors, working with law enforcement. And something you see harped on quite a bit in the guide too is this importance of legal counsel. In writing this, we had a lot of help, not only from our legal counsel on Homeland Security, but DOJ. We looked across, to our partners to say, make sure we're getting this right. Because there's a lot of concerns with certain types of sensors and what they collect. And whether or not they violate some type of civil right or civil liberty or some type of other sensitive data that someone would otherwise assume is protected.
Right.
And so any sensor you get, you should always take the time to sit down with your legal counsel and say, hey, are we on the right side here?
Or even with radars, sometimes it's FCC certification. On the flip side, even on the positive, like Part 108, drone delivery, which we haven't touched a lot yet, but in this conversation. But I mean, with all that, when you utilize radars for that application, they need to have certain certifications, and some are still under experimental license, right? Not to be used for that sort of commercial. They're looking for like automated data service providers where they're pushing all sorts of sensor data, including perhaps radars, for ground-based detect and avoid. But if they are not certified correctly, if you haven't done that research and check that out, that can be a stumbling block. And I'm working with folks right now. They're like, we have a system up that wasn't certified for this, so it's stuck. It's like we could use it experimentally, but we can't roll it into. It's supposed to last for the next 5-10 years, whatever it is. They have it up, but it's like still stuck in this experimental state because they hadn't done that research yet. So I thought that was an interesting. You just have to know. You have to do your research.
You have to do,
know?
and that's why we kind of make this a business case or a decision guide for leaders, because you may, in your survey review of your environment, you may determine that you're within X amount of miles of a radar system that's used for airports.
Totally.
And engaging with those vendors, if a radar is your option, you need to know that there's going to be some work
Yeah.
on your end to make sure you get the right FCC certifications to do that.
Yeah.
It may not be the thing for you. You may choose to go with RF, or you maybe don't want that.
Or
legal.
directional radar versus spinning,
Yeah,
so that
exactly.
you could, perhaps not point it towards that facility that the FCC
Yep.
won't approve. or
Yes,
whatnot,
exactly.
right?
So, and does that cover you where you want to be covered? So it's all about this guy was all about just know what you're getting.
Mm,
We had heard from a lot of our partners early on that vendors were approaching them and were giving them a lot of different options, and they didn't know up from down when it come to really what they were asking.
Totally.
And so that's what prompted us to say, let's do something that's going to give them a
good.
roadmap.
And like you said, a leader could read this. Someone who maybe is quite removed from the ground operator. Maybe they've never touched a drone in their life.
Yeah.
But they could at least get some language, as you mentioned, and say, and maybe tell their team, hey, here's these 3 buckets. Help me go out and
Yeah.
define the threat. Help me go out and review our assets and bring back what the crown jewels are, and then also then help me vet these technologies, but ask these questions, based on kind of what these buckets you put them in, right?
Yeah.
And then, hey, how are we going to respond to these alerts? Where do they go? Do we have that centrally managed in a software? Do we have the people we need to call? Well, look at the FIFA World Cup. It's each of these locations, each of these stadiums is going to need to work with a whole slew of federal, but also state, local law enforcement. They have their own drones now as first responder. They've got like all sorts of different sensors and packages and things that each of these agencies can bring to the table, but they all have to talk to each other and work together and come together up to that event to know how to coordinate, right? So
Right.
anyway, I could understand how this makes them ask the right questions
Yes.
to then start digging into the details, maybe with people that are a little more tactical, right?
Yeah. And so that was and that is consistent with how we operated in CISA.
Okay.
Was we tried to make sure that our guidance was always something that it's focused on our end user. Our partners are very busy. They're all for-profit organizations. They have many, many complex problems they're dealing with. So when we write guidance, we want to make sure it's plain language, it's direct and to the point, it's easy to follow, but it's detailed enough so an executive can look at it and say, all right, how are we addressing this one problem here, this one question,
Exactly.
without getting too into the details of the
Yeah.
technology. So I think that the team did a great job, with this,
Yeah, for sure.
and so
That
I
was
was excited
excellent.
about it.
That's great, man. Well, so then from here, looking forward, I'd love to hear what you can share about what you're doing next, and also advice, as many we mentioned multiple times now. FIFA World Cup coming, because that's a big one coming. There's a lot of major cities involved, right? East Coast, West Coast, that are all kind of scrambling right now on some level because there's a very short timeline before they need to do something, and there's funding from different sources. If you have any comments on funding, I don't know if you can speak to that yet. I think it's all still kind of pending, but at the time that we're recording this, but I see some things maybe from FIFA, quite a bit of funding there, and from the Big Beautiful Bill, there was like some things from that. So I think people are still figuring out how to get a hold of that. But I believe it's those who have a coherent plan that can speak the language, that can show how they would use that money, that they've vetted the sensors, that they have the alert, where the alerts are going. Maybe they've started testing some of them, or they have a small deployment and they want to expand it. It's people who actually do the work kind of rather quickly now that could, I believe, have a better chance of getting a hold of more funding, between December, January, whenever that starts rolling out. So they get equipment in place and tested and vetted before June or whatever, 2026. So we're on a very, very tight timeline. So anything you want to speak to the future? I think I added 3 or 4 questions bundled in there. So I guess whichever one you'd want to hit first.
No, I think FIFA, because I was working a lot with our partners in FIFA, and I worked a lot with stadiums, both across the various sports leagues, and I think we were making some real progress both on flight restrictions. So establishing flight restrictions and communicating flight restrictions to the public, and and using technology to address those that violate the flight restriction. And I think of all the partners within the critical infrastructure community, the stadiums seem to be pretty far ahead, because they have a lot of people that they're trying to protect. And so I think from that, I'm an optimist too, by the way. I believe we're going to figure this out. So from that perspective, if you're going to have any sector within the critical infrastructure community focus with this problem set on such a short timeline and such a scale that it's going to be, stadiums seem to be the right one to start it. They have the most success. But I think there's some tripwires, right? There's first and foremost is the authority. We all know that right now the authority's lapsed, and so realistically you can't deploy assets out under the current DHS DOJ authority to protect those. At least last time I checked.
And you're speaking to
124 in
the government shutdown and then lapse
the
that we're currently in as we're recording this. Yeah.
Yep.
Here early November. And so the authority for those select 4, I believe, federal agencies that could mitigate a drone.
Well, the 2 at least.
Okay.
DHS and DOJ.
Oh, right. Okay.
They're the only 2 that can really mitigate drones at a sporting event.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
And then the others like DoD, theirs didn't lapse, but
yeah.
Okay.
But they also can't really cover. I'm not a lawyer,
but that's probably not under their mission set.
No, it's not.
To deploy assets to like a football game or a soccer game or something.
That's correct.
Okay, so just for people's awareness, then currently, as of like early November, because of the lapse, then that was like a 5-year period where DHS and DOJ was it could deploy drone mitigation technology where they could jam a drone or do something, right?
They
to
could
actually
address
stop
a
it,
threat.
like if they had to, if it was like validated, it's carrying a payload, it's flying over a stadium, it's about to drop, like they could take action at that point,
Yes.
hit the red button, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
we've been doing that successfully.
Yeah, for 5 years plus, right? It was set for 5 years. It just expired. The government shuts down. It didn't get extended.
Yes.
So we're in this odd window there.
Yeah.
Hoping, I believe, that when the government opens, that gets reenacted pretty quickly. So then, assuming they'll again be able to have that authority by June 2026, hopefully, right? As an optimist, you would hope. But then,
I'm certain. It's just I think it's in the line of things you got to work on. I think it would be very important to recognize that you currently don't have the authority.
Yeah.
It's safe to assume that when we do get back to normal, that the authority will be extended. But that has to happen.
Absolutely.
Right?
And they currently would, at that point, assuming it gets extended, they would still be the only agencies allowed to physically mitigate a drone. Whereas state, local, commercial, stadiums, law enforcement today can detect with, certain things, right? I mean, like as long as the detection equipment isn't like decoding packets and wiretap, crossing wiretap and pen trap, laws, commercial entities can still deploy the type of sensors listed here in terms of acoustics, cameras, radars, remote ID, but then they don't have the ability then to like affect the drone. Like
no, they can only affect the operator.
They could go talk to the operator.
Yes,
that would be probably plan A would be,
which is typically what they do.
Determine where that operator is, go get in front of him, go talk to him, have him stand down, right? And I've heard, and you could probably tell me if this is accurate, but I've heard that it's very seldom that those with the authority, let's say the FBI is at a Super Bowl and they have the ability to mitigate. I heard that it's extremely rare that they would do that cyber takeover or that RF jamming. They attempt, to go talk to the operator and do all these other things first, which 8 or 9 out of 10 times is effective enough that they don't end up having to mitigate. Is that true, or do they mitigate as often as they, as they can?
No,
no.
Okay. I think from my experience in working with them, they use that very judiciously. Okay. That's why you haven't seen.
And why? Yeah. Or I mean, not to interrupt you, but yeah, just I'm curious.
Because I think it's important to recognize what you're doing when you're mitigating a drone, right? It's a cyber takeover, right? And I think those law enforcement agents that I've worked with, they take that responsibility very serious, and they have other options. That's always in the not getting outside my wheelhouse as a law enforcement officer, which I'm not. But they know they have other options, like the ground intercept teams, which kind of comes full circle to what we need to be doing, I think, for the FIFA World Cup locations, and which is, I think, the Achilles heel of all this, and it's education. Being able to get out to all the different local law enforcement entities, having them identify the likely launch points for where drones would likely come from, having patrol officers available and knowing what to say to an operator, how to approach them. The See Something, Say Something campaign, having individual citizens knowing and seeing and what to report when they see it. Individual operators, right, who just want to see something, knowing, getting to them and letting them know what their laws are, the rules are. They may not look at and see if there's a flight restriction. They just want to go up and see the World Cup from a bird's eye view,
Totally.
So
it might even be like a university dorm student that
A lot of
just
stuff.
launches a drone right
All
off
the
their
time.
balcony, and there's some stadiums at universities that are going to be utilized for practices and things for the World Cup. So that could be even in that instance, that university could do campaigns, educational campaigns within just the student body.
Education campaigns, to just inform the population, but also to train security and law enforcement on how to quickly intercept an operator, on what to do when they see a drone. So I think that is what we were trying to get at. It's just requires a lot of resources, a lot of depth in your reach to get to everyone. And it's still as a security practice, drone security is something that still I think we're developing. But I think in addition to just having the technology deployed or having the authority, having education and awareness, is this going to be resource availability, right? Having the technologies that are at all the right sites and tuned to those sites, and operating as long as they have to operate. With as few operators as I think we have, most counter UAS operators or cops or law enforcement is a secondary duty. You're starting to see it more and more. They're getting more professionalized, but it's a lot that still has to happen with that.
Yeah.
So you're right. Within the next six or 8 months, there's a lot has to happen. The only good thing I think with all that is we have a lot of experience. DHS and FBI have been doing a wonderful job over the last 5 or 6 years in protecting stadiums, the Super Bowl being a good example where we always go down there or at those games. And so it's not something we're not inexperienced at. It's just the scale is going to be pretty different.
Yeah.
And whether we can reach the demand is going to be something that's going to be telling.
And I wonder, I guess, what would your advice be on that besides like read this report, click the links, read the follow-ups, go to the websites that probably explain some of the resources that the federal government might provide. But otherwise, if there's a security aid or a group listening right now that's a local law enforcement or a stadium that's going to be hosting one of these games, or the Olympics coming up, or anything between now and then that they're concerned about drones, I guess. Read, get educated, but what would you say to them in terms of how they can bring the most impact within their world, or if they're just like they happen to listen into this and they're like, wow, this is a big deal. What should I do about it? What do you think? What would you advise, I guess? Because hopefully we spark maybe 10 people listen to this and then that's 10. There's 10 or 11 cities, that are involved with FIFA. And it could be one person in each of those cities listening right now.
Hopefully,
and then that want to take the the baton and round some people up and do some workshops, or I don't know, what would you say to them if you sat down with them right now, I guess?
No, I think that's it. I think and I'm certain a lot of these law enforcement communities, because we've been working on this for a while, are doing this, but making sure every security professional, every law enforcement professional that's out there on the streets and dealing with this is educated on drones and what to do. Doing the homework now on where people are launched from, having the ability to have observation posts where you can see someone launching and try to get to them, because the technology is going to be what it is, right? Either we're going to get the authority and we have the resources to deploy it. I think local law enforcement don't control that. That's something that the federal government's bringing to bear. So if you focus on what you do control, is community outreach, training forces on what to do, what to look for, and how to get to operators in a timely manner. That's what I would be focused on. You can't really harden,
Right.
an open stadium as you
tough.
would like. So if your concern is a kinetic weaponization of drones, and that's a real concern, is really not a whole lot I think you can do, unless you have technology deployed that can counter it. But just being vigilant and working that local level awareness I think gives you the most bang for your buck.
Well, and one thing that comes to my mind is there are select law enforcement agencies around the country that are deploying systems that even I'm aware of with radars, and
Hmm.
a lot of times they're like a mobile trailer
Yeah,
that they're bringing to different events
sure.
and games, and they have various sensors already on them, and they're already trained, and
Hmm.
they already know how to tune it, move
Yep.
it, tune it, do all and they get training from vendors and folks. So those particular agencies would probably be a great resource for others to
Yeah.
call. Hey, what are you using? What's working? Is your equipment available on game day, X,
Hmm.
Y, and Z to this location? Maybe they could converge some of their
Yeah.
resources, and then maybe those agencies could be the ones that if they have the time and resources in the next few months to host the other agencies in their area to be able to just kind of show and tell, sort of a
Yeah.
demo, but not necessarily a product demo as much as all the things you described. It could be educational campaign, it could be all the above.
Yep.
And I do know that vendors like myself would be happy to help support, help fund, help bring real time like demonstrations. I mean, I'm sure there would be plenty of private sector folks that would see it as a potential business opportunity that
Hmm.
would help
I'm certain.
with the resource, paying for the space or whatever that looks like. But I would say that as well as putting that on the table is call your vendor friends, the folks that you work with, your
Hmm.
partners, and see what they're open to do contributing,
Yeah.
as well, right? Because I think that's what it's all, it's going to take the whole community, I guess.
It really does. And it brings up another good point about the whole community. Something we did at CISA that I would always uh, happy to take part in was the exercises that we would run, either tabletop exercises or full scale exercises. I'd be very surprised if all of these different stadiums and these communities are hosting the FIFA World Cup don't have or haven't already conducted exercises, but bringing everyone in the room and going through a scenario and saying, hey, this happened, what do you do? It really brings to light who knows what to do and who does it in a way where it's a learning environment. So if you don't know what to do, it's fine. Now let's talk to you, let's figure it out. But rehearsing possible scenarios would be something that I would absolutely hope they're doing. Uh, but again, optimistically thinking they are doing that.
Right.
But you need
Or
to rehearse.
mhm. Or and even to that point, walking the physical site,
Hmm.
workshopping
Yeah.
in a, maybe a room, but then walking the site, even bringing your own DFR drones if you're law enforcement, zipping over,
Flying them
seeing,
over.
seeing where the paths could be, seeing where the launch points might be. You could even get coverage of that footage of it, or
Hmm.
even test it. Can we zip along that little path? Like, yeah, we sure could. Okay, well, that's a vulnerability.
Hmm.
We can't really see if you're there. Let's maybe position law enforcement agents during the game on either end of that little
Hmm.
stretch, because that's where maybe someone would likely try to zip in underneath, under the radar, perhaps, or
Yeah.
right. You'd
You
notice
could.
all that.
You could. And probably just as important, land one. This is the stadium, right? Land one.
Hmm.
And what do you do? Because I think,
Hmm.
you know, the onlookers, the people who are participating and the fans, they're going to respond
Hmm.
to the security and how they respond to a down drone. So however you respond to that, I know FIFA is great at it. I've talked to them, and a lot of the different stadiums, they have good plans, but giving confidence that you have it under control and not creating a bigger problem out of something.
Big stampede or something out of
Yeah,
nowhere.
so practicing, what happens when one lands. We've had them crash into mini stands before. How do you respond to that in a way that doesn't create panic? How do you message that?
Hmm.
Um, so I'm certain they're doing those things, but you have to think full scale. It's not just one flying over, which those are a problem, and dipping down like we've seen. But what happens if they crash? Um,
Which you want to avoid making it crash on accident by not knowing how to leverage the technology correctly, right? In terms of like the
if you could,
jamming mitigation
yeah,
technology, that's
yeah,
part of the concern of that is who knows what the drone's going to do if we actually interrupt its
yeah.
signal. Maybe we accidentally make it crash when it was just going to swoop through and create
Hmm.
a stampede, right?
Who knows, right?
So
So,
that's
but I
always the
think that's
risk.
that's important to practice, and
Okay.
mistakes will happen, of course. But I think having that,
Scenario run
yeah,
through basically.
and that synergy built around your security staff to represent the fact that you know what you're doing in your control.
Even just confident,
Yeah.
even like, okay, it's happening, but we've practiced this. I'm good. I know my part.
Hmm.
Then that would help convey whoever's walking by, that officer or that person
Hmm.
is going to see they're confident, they're good. Like, we got a plan. Don't worry, it's cool.
Yep.
But if they're freaking out, that's the first time they've ever thought about this happening.
Hmm.
That's an issue, right?
It could be, right?
Or could.
So there's an opportunity now to start
Sure.
looking at how do you practice and how do you rehearse that. So you can do it take care of it swiftly and safely.
Exactly. All right. Well, I guess the last thing I'd love to hear about is just looking forward. What are you up to next that you can
Yeah.
share, or if there's some big reveal, or if you can, I don't know.
Big
No,
reveal.
but just I'd love to hear what you're doing, how people can, engage with you personally or professionally
Yeah.
as you move forward. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, thank you. Nothing firm yet. So what I have come to the realization of is I really enjoyed, after taking some time and being with family and slowing the pace down, I come full circle, and I really enjoy helping advance national security, helping keep communities safe. It's something that I'm passionate about, and so I plan to get back into that here soon. And there's an intersection where I feel like I have a lot of experience and desire, and that's at the intersection of security, risk management, and drone technology. And so, I want to take that experience and start to see how I can deliver that to both the private and public sector. How do I help them and share that information? Whether it's being a consultant or something else, we'll see. But it's still kind of early in the process. But I know it's going to be in that space, and I'm excited about it, just because I'm getting back integrated with people like you. All the friends and
Totally.
colleagues that I was working with so much before in the drone and counter drone space and the risk management space and the critical infrastructure community. I really am excited to get back out there and start talking and sharing what I know and helping where I can.
Nice. Yeah, it is kind of a happy family within these ecosystems, huh?
It is. It really is. It's good to be around the same people I was, working so closely with for
great.
so long.
That's awesome, man. Well, I guess people could find you on LinkedIn. That'd be a great way. I'll
the
make
best
sure
way.
your profile's linked on the video.
Thank you.
Otherwise, any last, I have kind of a wild question, which is, what do you predict is going to be the next thing that groups like CISA, or, I mean, I'm sure you can't speak to them, but, what's, they picked up the idea of drones being a threat in 2018 before its day.
Mhm.
What do you think is the next big threat, I guess, or like the next frontier?
Yeah.
If you had to guess, I'm curious.
That's a tough. I think. I really think it's going to be a balancing act between treating drones as a threat and treating drones as a force multiplier. A lot of the partners I spoke to, they use drones for the business, and so the last thing they would want is an overly bureaucratic process to fly drones in order to make their businesses more profitable and to make their people more safe. So it's going to be a balancing act between understanding what our partners use the technology for and not getting in the way, but also recognizing that some people use technology for bad and building the right guidance and information in order for organizations to kind of deal with those when they do occur, recognizing they don't occur a lot. But so I think that's the first thing. And the next thing is the rapid pace in which drones advance and how they are taking on things like machine learning, machine vision, artificial intelligence, this
Autonomy, really.
autonomy, this fiber optic concern, or this RF silent environment where they can fly. If you are a bad actor, your ability to do more with drones is going to become more and more capable.
Off the shelf, really, almost.
Almost off the
In a
shelf.
way.
And the lessons that learned, we've always seen this, but when we were looking at ISIS and what they were doing overseas, that was one thing. But the storyboards you have now from the UK and Russia conflict are plentiful. And so anyone who is looking to use drones for bad now has a pretty large playbook that they can pull from. So I think, as a department, trying to make sure you stay ahead of that without creating an environment where all drones are bad. That's the thing that really causes me a lot of concern. One is the Black Swan event where someone uses it and a lot of people get hurt. We're all concerned about that. Another concern, maybe just shy of that, or just under that, is the idea that something's going to happen. It's going to be an overreaction, and now we've grounded all the drones, right? And so now you're losing the technology that has proved to be so beneficial to the community.
And we couldn't
Law
afford
enforcement
that as a
No.
economy, as
You couldn't, right?
in terms of our need as a country. Even the warfighter, we need to create technology. We need to stay ahead of the curve on emerging technologies, drones being one of
Yep.
the
Yep.
one of the forefront. But how do you do that if worst case, the commercial world was capped off, not allowed to fly, or whatever
You
the
know,
case,
and
right?
to me, so to me, that's like a really bad situation. That's not beyond, you know, someone's imagination, but just as a department being able to balance that between the two. You know, like
And as a market
Yep.
as well, you know, like
As
the
a market
department.
too.
But then let's
Yeah.
let's do a good job on the private side,
Mhm.
being thoughtful, being careful, getting the licenses, whatever, getting the approval, you know,
Yeah.
doing everything so that we avoid
Yes.
unnecessary
Being the problem.
reaction, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
avoid being the problem.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And so I think that's going to be the real test. Not to mention, you know, the resource constraints, because this takes a lot. Training the people. I think we need to get to the point where we're training people how to be drone experts. You know, not just counter UAS, but drone experts. And I think I opened up with this idea that I learned a lot just by going out and flying my drone. And then I learned even more when I got my Part 107 license and I started flying them with like an air of responsibility. Right now, I know a lot more than I did before. So before I'd go to a place, I would fly because it's not on the list of, it's open, you know, there's no restrictions, so I fly. Now I go somewhere, I look around, and say, well, let me go talk to this person here. I just want to make sure they know what I'm doing.
Nice.
Because I feel more responsible and I've never had a problem. So just doing that, but that's all education, right? Not everyone's going to take the time to do a 107 and do these things. But yeah, that to me is what I'm most concerned about, is that type of environment where we overreact and we cause more problems with the drone space.
Right on, man. Well, thank you. Thanks for sitting down with me.
No, I really appreciate being here.
This is great. And I hope that, you know, people learn from the report, learn from the advice, and then ultimately stay connected to you and what you do next.
Yeah.
So
Appreciate it.
right on, man.
Take care, man.
Absolutely. You too.